Hey guys, for today's video, we're going to be doing a lived-in ashy mushroom brown foliage. For this service, we're going to be using Schwarzkopf blonde meat with 20 volume and Olaplex. Here's my client's before. You can tell that her grow out is a good couple of months. She only comes in maybe like once or twice a year, and she always wants her hair to be really rooty. That way it grows out a lot softer and she doesn't have any harsh lines of demarcation. We're going to be doing a pretty heavy foliage today. We're going to be doing a full service. One thing that I hear a lot of people ask me about is how to get a good blend. If you notice when I'm taking my sections, you can't really see very well, but I am going through and doing like a zigzag parting. It might not be very defined, but that line is not straight across. That's gonna help when all the hair is down. It's gonna help diffuse that line a little bit more. Also, going through and backcombing pretty heavily is gonna push up some hair. That way, when everything combs back down, it's gonna also help create more of a blend and diffuse any harsh lines that there might be. So if you're going through doing a zigzag parting, backcombing, and also weaving your section that you're doing, I feel like all of that will help incorporate to have a really good blend. Another thing is to make sure that the hair that you're applying lightener on isn't too thick, because when you're feathering up, if your section is too thick and you're not like saturating very good, that's when you can get like splotchiness or like orangey spots in the hair. Make sure that your sections are not too thick. You want to be able to see through the hair to the foil. That way you can get good saturation and get better lift. One thing that people say when they feel like their hair is darker, feel like their hair is too dark, is the section that I'm doing right here, right behind the ears and also kind of at the nape of the neck. When all their hair is pulled forward, that hair directly behind their ear and at the nape of the neck, sometimes they feel like it's too dark. So make sure you're not forgetting to do that section. I usually go in a little bit heavier because they can have like a whole bunch of blonde all over their hair. But if that hair that's falling forward from the underneath side is dark, they're going to feel like they have a lot of dark like around their face kind of falling through, and they're going to feel like they just have a whole bunch of dark hair. Make sure that even if it's just the nape of the neck area, that way, like from the ears and below, make sure that you're going through there a little bit heavier handed, at least through the ends, so that way when the hair falls forward over their shoulders, it's nice and bright. If you're seeing me going through it and like picking up the foil on the other side, right there, it's because I'm double checking to see how far up I'm going into the root area. One thing you want to make sure is that you have good balance everywhere. You don't want to go, up to the root on one side and then the other side you only did like the midsection through the ends. So that's why you always see me like going back and forth and double checking my work to make sure that we're creating even balance on both sides. Let me tell you, like, one thing that I don't understand is people that will foil or do a foliage, whatever, on a whole half of a head and then go back through and do the other side. That stresses me out. Like, I don't remember exactly how far for every piece of hair I'm either going up higher to the root or I'm staying more in like the midsection area, or maybe I'm just like tipping out the ends. So that if you see me like go back and forth pretty regularly, that's why, because I want to make sure that everything that I'm doing has balance and there's equal brightness around the whole head. Another thing I think is really good for you guys to take note of is look at how much of her natural hair that I have falling between the foils. Look at these subsections. She's not wanting to be blonde. She wants to be lived in. She wants to have like ashy, mushroomy tones in her hair. She wants to maintain pretty much her natural color. She doesn't want to have like a whole bunch of blonde around her face or, you know, super high up into her root. She doesn't want to be considered a blonde. So make sure that you're maintaining a lot of your clients' natural depth in their hair. It's really easy, especially like there was a time when so many people just wanted to be like so bright blonde and so much blonde, and then in your mind, especially if you're like me where all you do is like mostly a lot of blondes, then you think like, oh, they just want to be bright, and then we overdo it and we overfoil, and then now they're considered a blonde instead of, you know, just they're natural with just some soft highlights going through. So make sure that you're not overdoing your foils. Less is more when somebody wants to maintain their natural and have more of like a lived in blonde color. I also am not going through and painting through the ends as much. If somebody wants to be like super heavily blonded, I'll usually go through and tip out like almost between every foil. But for her, because she wants to maintain most of her natural color and be more lived in, I don't want to overdo it with the blonde. So you're just going to see me go through and pick up every like few sections. I'm just going to grab the hair and tip out some of the ends. I'm not even going up that high. I'm really just sticking down towards the bottom. So that's also another thing to keep in mind. Okay, you're gonna notice as I come up into this area, like the hair that lays on top of the whole underneath half, is I'm gonna be doing some pretty defined weaves, like some big, thick, chunky weaves. That's because we want to see more ribbons of brightness throughout the hair. For someone that wants to be lived in, make sure you're asking them, like for somebody that wants to maintain more of their natural dark hair, make sure you're asking them, do they want to see like more blended blonde, or do they want to see more ribbons and defined dimensional blonde pieces? That's because if somebody wants to be a little bit more blended, then you might feel like it's too heavy of a blonde because you're basically taking slices and you're getting like a full sheet of blonde that's falling on the hair, and then it's gonna have like an overall lighter appearance, where if you, which is fine if that's what somebody wants, but if somebody wants to be more lived in and have like defined ribbons of blonde, you can see this last weave that I'm foiling up right now. There's like some really big chunky like weaves that I was doing. So make sure, or, you know, and even if they don't have a preference, like sometimes people might be like, oh, I don't care. Like, I just want to maintain like majority of my natural color, but I don't really care like if it's blended or defined pieces or whatever. So you'll see in some areas, like I'm going to do some really defined weaves, but then there's going to be some other areas where I'm doing like just a really like, it's a weave, but it's, you know, it's not like too big of a chunky weave of subsections of hair. Like look at this piece right here. You can see it's not just a slice, it's kind of an inconsistent weave, but that's still going to give them, you know, give her some dimension in the hair. But she's going to have like different variations of blonde throughout, because some pieces are going to be like defined ribbons. Other pieces are going to be, you know, more sporadic, like heavily weaved throughout her hair. So just make sure you're kind of giving some different variations of foils. That way it doesn't look too similar throughout her whole hair. Somebody always asks, so if you're wondering what these big, huge foils that I'm using that span across the whole back section around the head, it's the Big Papa foils from Framar. I really like this because instead of having to do like 3 different sections around this wider part of the head, you basically can just get one of their foils and it wraps around the whole back half of the head, and you can just do one big section. So I highly recommend getting those foils. I love them. It's not like you're going to want to use the whole thing for, the whole head, because that would be a waste. But for some areas where maybe like just using a standard foil, it's not big enough, using a big pop-up foil by Framar definitely like makes the job go a lot faster. Instead of having to like 3 or 4 foils like in the back section of the head, you can just do one huge foil and call it good. Highly recommend. Okay, as I'm getting closer to the top of her head where she parts her hair, you're going to notice that I'm taking smaller sections. I'm going up a lot further than I was in kind of the underneath section of her hair. I'm going in a lot higher up into her roots, and that's because even though she wants to be lived in, I don't want to do my foils and feather up maybe like 3 or 4 inches away from her roots, because this color is going to grow out so fast and she's going to feel like she has to come in a lot sooner. Even if somebody wants to have a lived in rooty color, I still go up in to the roots, and I don't necessarily every time like bring the bleach like directly up to their scalp. Sometimes I'm within an inch to like 3 inches of their roots, depending on how rooty they want to be or how dark their hair is. And that's because we're going to go through her hair and do like an ashy mushroomy color of a root melt. And it's going to cover up those foils that we just did. The thing is, though, the toners never cover up the foils like 100%. You can still see through the root shadow, and you can still see those highlights kind of shining through a little bit. And it creates like a really soft dimension in the crown, like the rooty crown area, where even if they want to be like lived in, they necessarily don't want to feel like they just have their dark roots. Like, you can still do a lived in color, take the foils, the foliage, the bleach up higher up into their hair, and then do like a color melt, and it will still give them like, it will maintain their natural color. They're still definitely going to be like very rooty, very lived in, but they're going to have like a really soft amount of dimension showing through. And then when their hair starts growing out, like in 2 months or whatever, as the toner starts fading, it's going to brighten up and they're going to feel like their hair isn't growing out that much. So imagine if like if I only foiled up into like the mid section of the hair, and then, of course that's going to look good because she has a fresh haircut or her hair hasn't grown out yet or whatever, and she's nice and lived in, whatever. But then just imagine like 6 months down the road from now, all of that, her hair is going to be so much longer. All of that blonde is just going to be like through the midsections to the very ends of the hair, and then she's going to have all these super dark roots. So by going through, and look at how high I'm going up right now, in like especially around her face, we're going up a little bit closer. We're going to darken that up, but by the time like 3 to 6 months from now, as her hair grows out, yeah, she's going to have like her dark roots. But if you can remember what her hair looked like in the before, and I'm going to show you at the very end, you'll notice that her blonde is only a few inches like off of her roots. It's not like just through the midsections or the ends. So I say, even if somebody wants to be rooty, and even if somebody wants to be lived in, and they say that they don't want a lot of blonde up into their crown area, I say still do it and then tone it back down, because they're going to get a lot of longevity out of their color. 4 months from now, as their toner fades out, they're going to feel bright. Like, those highlights are definitely going to start showing through again, and they're not going to feel like they need to come back in as often, which maybe that's bad of me to think that way, because that's less money in my pocket, because they can like get almost, a whole year out of their color, or 6 months out of their color or whatever. But I just want my clients to be happy with their hair if they want to be lived in, and I want them to have longevity. Like, color is so expensive now for hair. Like, I mean, you're looking at like $400, $450, whatever, like $500. Everybody's different, but like, I want my clients to be happy with their hair, and I don't want them to feel like, oh my God, I just blew like 500, 600, however much on my hair, and now I got to go back like 3 months later. That's a lot to have to pay every 3 months. I mean, that's a lot to have to pay regardless. So the longer you can let your clients go without feeling the need to have to come in, the better. Like, obviously we want to see your clients, but we also want to give them what they want. Oh, if you're used to watching my videos, and for the majority of my clients, I always go through and do the hairline foils like right on their face, and I'm not doing that for this client. That's because she doesn't really want to have a whole bunch of brightness like up to her roots on her hairline on her face. She wants her hair to be able to grow and not feel like she needs to come in at all at any point. So if you do a whole bunch of foils directly on their face and give them like a super bright, bold money piece that's all the way up to her scalp, then 6-8 weeks later, as her hair grows out, she's gonna notice her harsh line of a money piece. Then she might feel like she needs to come in a lot sooner. So I'm not going through and doing my standard foils. I'm going through and I'm making sure that I can blend out these foils and darken them at the roots. So there's no reason for me to go through and like do such a detailed hairline foil. Like for this foil, see, for her money piece, she doesn't want like it all the way up to her roots. So I backcombed this section, and you could see where I laid down the bleach was probably like 1.5 to 2 inches away from her roots. And then I started feathering up into her roots. Look, I'm putting the bleach down like 1 inch off of her scalp and then feathering up. So that's going to give her a little bit more of a rooty money piece. And that back comb's going to come out. It's going to soften any of the bleach lines or whatever that might be in the hair. But then also we're going to go through with the root shadow and make sure everything's like blending really nicely. So, yeah, I am going through a little bit heavier with like the foils that I'm packing in there. But we're going to soften everything with a root shadow. But I just wanted to point that out, that we're not going straight up into her scalp with the bleach. You can see that I'm applying it like 2 inches, 3 inches away from her roots and then feathering it up. All right, we're going to finish these last few foils on like right on her part. And you can see that I don't do a heavy amount like right on her part area. That's because this is the hair that's going to lay on top, and I don't want it to be too bright and too heavy of blonde. So they're just like little slivers of weaves that I'm doing like right where she parts her hair. I didn't want to cause any damage by running bleach all the way through her ends when I first started her application, because we've already lightened her hair before, but you can see that the lightener has brightened up her new growth, and then it's brighter than the previous highlights that we did. So I'm just going through her foils, and I'm incorporating like the ends of her hair and trying to brighten those up to match with like the rest of her foliage. And some foils don't need it, but some areas might. So always make sure that you're going through and checking your foil work to make sure if you have to like bring any lightener through the ends or whatever, make sure you're taking care of that. Okay, let's get into our root shadow. That 623 is the perfect dark ash matte color with a little bit of a natural 7. That's her root color. This Paul Mitchell, this is going to be her all over lighter, brightest pieces that we're going to be doing for a nice, bright, cool, icy blonde. And here's her application. I already went through and did it all over toner to brighten her ends. And then now I'm going to go through with her root color, and that sat for about 20 minutes. Here's her color after everything's said and done. So see what I'm talking about, how you can see through that root shadow and you can see that soft dimension. Here's her before, and you can see where her old highlights were, and here is her after. You can see that she's still very rooty, but look at when we go up closer into her root area, you can just see through like those highlights that are kind of showing through. So it still appears really dark and rooty, but when you get closer up into her hair, you can see that there's just fine little highlights that are starting to show through. And then, in 4 months from now, it's going to brighten back up and she's going to feel like she doesn't need to come back in. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys liked it, and I will see you guys next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe.